Hello and welcome to this guide to passing the Functional Skills English Level 1 writing exam. This is an Oak Tree English video. This video is remarkably similar to the Level 2 writing exam video because the exams are remarkably similar. This one is specifically geared towards the Pearson Edexcel paper, but the advice will be useful for anyone taking this qualification. This is a blatant attempt to get more views on my channel by making essentially the same video twice. The main difference is where I appear on the screen and the fact that I've got a cool blurred circle background now. On the front of your sheet, you will see some fun things to fill in before you start your exam. So you've got to write your name, your center number, candidate number. All of this will be provided for you on the day. Don't panic. You will be given everything. Please note that you may not use a dictionary. In fact, you must not use a dictionary. Just swapping out a modal auxiliary verb there, because this is not the reading exam. You're allowed to use a dictionary in the reading exam, not in the writing exam. Also note that when you sign this paper, you are essentially signing something like the Official Secrets Act. You're not allowed to talk about it afterwards. So, also on the front sheet, you'll see some instructions. Now, when you're given instructions by an examiner, you listen to those instructions, okay? Because they don't give them for fun. So while you're waiting for the exam to kick off, take some time to read through these, but they will probably look almost identical to this. So you use black ballpoint pen, you fill in the boxes at the top of the page with your name, center number and candidate number, as I just told you. You sign the declaration, answer both tasks. That's right, both tasks. There are two tasks. You do both of them, not one of them. You both of them. Okay. Use the answer space provided to complete your tasks, and there's almost certainly going to be more space than you need, but that's what you're expected to do. The total mark for the paper is usually 36. Sometimes there can be some variation, but usually it's 36. Task 1 has 21 marks, task 2 has 15 marks, so they're not the same weighting. We'll talk about that in a second. You're going to be assessed on spelling, punctuation and grammar in both tasks. I'll talk to you about what you're going to be assessed on in a moment. Here's the advice that the examiners give you. This is, if you watch the Great British Bake Off, this is like what Prue says before the technical. Read each task carefully before you start to write. This is good advice. Please take it to heart. Aim to spend about 35 minutes on task 1 and about 25 minutes on task 2. Again, this reflects the different weighting. Task 1 is more valuable. And plan your work before you start and check it when you finish. If you don't know how to do that yet, then I question what your teacher's been doing with you. You should know that you have to plan your work. I'm a bit small here. I wonder if I can get myself a bit bigger. Let's find out. Nope, same size. Oh well. So, how many questions did I say there were? That's right, there's 2 questions. This must be the easiest exam in the world. There's only 2 questions. 3 if you count what is your name. How many of these questions should you answer? Obviously, both of them. Obviously. If you answer only one question, you're doing something profoundly wrong. So please answer both questions. How much time should you spend? There's 60 minutes in total. So you spend 35 minutes on task 1, 25 minutes on task 2. And what I've just told you in this slide is exactly what the instructions told you on the last slide. This is not complicated stuff. Task 1 is more valuable. Task 2 is still very valuable. Okay. I don't like where I am on the screen. Let's see if I can move myself. Ah, that's better. And I'm bigger too. So The mark scheme tells us this is what the examiners see, and this is almost identical to the level 2 paper. So you're being marked on exactly the same criteria. Slightly less is expected of you at level 1, but the criteria are the same. So let's have a look. You're marked on composition and Spag. Spag is how much spaghetti you can eat. No, hang on, that's not right. Spag is how well you cook bolognese. No, that's not right. Hold on. Spag is spelling, punctuation, and grammar. We'll talk about that in just a moment. This is exactly what the examiner sees. Dun dun dun! There you go. For composition, that's what you write. What you write. You are marked on the fact that you must communicate your information, ideas and opinion. Communicate clearly. Communicate clearly. That's what you've got to do. Communicate information, ideas and opinions clearly, using detail effectively for purpose and audience to an appropriate length. Communicate clearly. Second point, uses appropriate format and structure for audience and purpose with effective use of paragraphs. You're marked on format and structure. That's whether you split it into paragraphs, how you split it into paragraphs, how you've organized it. We'll talk about that in a moment. Uses a range of sentences, including complex sentences, with consistent accuracy. A range of sentences. There's 3 main types of sentences. I'll talk about those in a moment. Please try and use all of them. Let's have a look at the last one. Uses a wide range of vocabulary, consistently appropriate to task. Vocab. Use lots of words. English has more words than any other language in the world. Use them. You're also marked on SPAG, spelling, punctuation and grammar, which includes correct use of grammar. For example, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a list of examples. Exemplary. Subject verb agreement. That's when we'll talk about that in a moment or two, but make sure your subject and your verb agree. So if there's plural, you use were, not was, for example. Consistent use of different tenses. This is writing in different time periods is the easy way to remember that. Definite and indefinite articles. The and a. English has 2 articles, the and a. German has 16. Count yourself lucky you're learning English. German also has more logical spelling, but that's another story. So definite and indefinite articles, please make use of them. If you're not from the UK and this is something that you don't have in your own language, practice, practice, practice. This is an area particularly Slavic speakers, so people from Russia, Ukraine, Poland, even Romania to a degree, struggle with articles. So please make sure you can get that right. So the second one is correct use of punctuation. That's the P in SPAG. Check out how straightforward this is. That put a full stop at the end of your sentence, or question mark at the end of a question, or an exclamation mark when you're shouting. Commas. A comma is pronounced like this. Not to be confused with a full stop, which is pronounced like this. If you're going to draw a breath somewhere, this is a rule of thumb. If you're going to draw a breath somewhere in a sentence, mark it with a comma. And possessive apostrophes, actually any apostrophes need to be correct. We'll talk about apostrophes in a moment because they trip people up. Notice it also says with occasional lapses. If you miss an apostrophe somewhere, they are not going to crucify you for it. So don't panic. Don't go through and think, oh, should I have hyphenated that word? Oh no, I don't know whether I should have put a hyphen in it, a little line to connect it. I don't know. Don't go to pieces. It's okay. Occasional lapses are not going to affect your mark massively. Okay? It's when there's a pattern of a problematic pattern. Ooh, alliteration. Right, spelling. Spelling of words. Listen to the wording here. This is important. Spelling of words used most often in work, study and daily life, including specialist words, is accurate with occasional lapses. There is lots of wiggle room here. So if you spell a word that you don't use very much, like transubstantiation, this is not a common word. You could say it's a specialist word, but unless you're writing about the doctrine of Catholic Mass, it's probably not going to come up. So if there's a word that you use regularly that you know there's a problem with, learn it. We'll talk about this in a second. If, however, you are thinking of using a word but you're not sure how to spell it, use it anyway, do the best you can, and it will count towards the wide range of vocabulary, even if it doesn't count towards a Spag mark. And that is what you're marked on. Would you like to go through that in more detail? Of course you would. Here we go. So, effective writing. I've moved again. Ooh. Effective writing. Sentences. A sentence in English includes a subject and a verb. Shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. It's a full sentence. It has a subject, Jesus, and a verb, a finite verb. That is a verb in a tense. Wept, past tense. And it makes sense. That's all you need for a sentence. That's all you need for a sentence. A subject, a verb, and for it to make sense. Now, there's other words you can use. And you might want to shove an object in there just for fun, or you might want to do some fancy stuff with a compound subject or whatever you like. But the basic criteria, what you need more than anything else, is a subject and a verb. If it doesn't have those two things, it isn't a sentence. Okay. Paragraphs. You will be marked on splitting things into a paragraph. Now, everything in life, including indeed life itself, consists of three parts: a beginning, a middle, and an end. Paragraphs work the same way. So your beginning is your first sentence in a paragraph, is your topic sentence. That is the one that tells you what the rest of the paragraph is going to say. Your second one in the middle, well, this points 1, 2, and 3 are your supporting points, supporting or fleshing out your topic sentence. And in the end, you've got a conclusion, which may well link on to the next sentence, next paragraph. It's also true that your overall writing will have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, if you've got about 200, 300 words to play with, and it is about 200 words, you might want to split it up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. An introductory paragraph, 1, 2, 3 main body paragraphs, and a concluding paragraph, each with 50 words each. That's 250 words. Boom, I've just embedded some numeracy in this video. I hope you're impressed. My boss will be. So that's everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Use your hand for planning. And proofread at the end. Make sure that you haven't got any glaring spelling errors. Make sure that you haven't got any that every sentence has a subject and a verb. Make sure that every sentence is on point, is actually answering the question. If it's not answering the question, get it out of there. Replace it with a better sentence. Okay. You've got to be answering the question. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your hands. Doesn't quite work, does it? Okay. You need to plan your work. This is fairly straightforward. You could do this with bullet points. 1, 2, 3. You could do it with a mind map. That's where you put the idea in the middle and then spidergram some lines out from that. You could write an essay map where you do a numbered list 1, 2, 3, and then put 3 points beside each idea. That's how I usually organize it. And you can remember how to do this because you take this into the exam with you. Okay, there's nothing on the other side. You don't write your answers on there. That's a bad idea. Don't do it. You will be thrown out. But you have this as a reminder of how to do it. There, joins on, double-handed. So you start off with an introduction. That's why you're writing. So for example, if you're writing a letter, dear sir or madam, I am writing to complain about environmental issues in my area. Or if you're writing an article, this article will seek to explore the meaning of the paranormal. I don't know. I'm pulling things out of the air here. So the introduction will say why you're writing. You've got about 50 words to play with here, so just so you don't have to be too expansive. But if you can say, I'm going to look at this and this and this, and you're going to look at what 3 points you're going to do, and you've got a fairly easy plan ready. Then you've got point 1, point 2, and point 3 in your main body. This is where you're developing the ideas that you've introduced in your introduction. Ah, okay. Stop me if I'm getting complicated here. So this would be something like if you're writing about environmental impacts in your local area, you might want to talk about litter and pollution and car traffic. Then you might want to write, and then you would introduce each paragraph with your topic sentence, and then write 2 or 3 sentences following on, expanding on that. It really is writing by numbers. It's not complicated. Then you will write a conclusion. This is where you'll revisit the topic that you introduced in the introduction. Where you started talking about, and you'll do the same thing again at the end. Use different words. This is where a chance for you to use that range of vocabulary that they're looking for. And also what you hope to achieve. Why have you written the article? Why have you written the letter or the email or the web post? Why have you done that? Do you want a response? Are you just trying to get information out there? What's your purpose for it? That's a 5-point plan, but there's an easier one even than that. There's a 3-point plan. The 3-point plan goes very simply. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them, and tell them what you've told them. That's your 3-point plan. And that's your 3-point plan for any piece of writing that you do from now into the future. Let's talk about vocabulary, if we can. Hold on. Let's talk about vocabulary. Part of that includes sentences. Now, I told you to begin with there were 3 types of sentences. There's simple, compound, and complex. So, a simple sentence is one independent clause. For example, I passed the exam. I passed the exam. Simple sentence. A compound sentence is 2 independent clauses. That's clauses that can stand on their own, joined by a conjunction such as and or but, for. For example, I passed the exam, but Jane failed. Jane failed is an independent clause, could work as a simple sentence on its own. I passed the exam is a simple sentence and can work as is an independent clause and can work as a simple sentence on its own. Join them together with but, and you've got a compound sentence. A complex sentence is where you've got one independent clause, that's a subject and verb that makes sense and can stand as a simple sentence on its own, plus a dependent clause, which means that it's a clause that does not work on its own. It needs an extra, needs something to cling on to. BBC Bite Size do a nice thing with that. Helicopters fly when they have fuel, and then the helicopter falls out of the sky. BBC Bite Size is an excellent resource. It's the second best channel on YouTube after this one. I'm not entirely serious. Please don't sue me, BBC. So here's another example. Jane failed the exam because she didn't watch this video. Jane failed the exam. There's your independent clause. That works on its own. But if you add in because she didn't watch this video, that's a dependent clause. It doesn't work on its own. It's meaningless on its own. Join them together. Jane failed the exam because she didn't watch this video, and suddenly you've got a complex sentence. Your examiner is looking for both types of sentences, or for all three types of sentences. Simple sentences can create a sort of quite quick moving text if you have lots of simple sentences. Compound sentences give a little bit more information, slows the text down a little bit. Complex sentences give much more depth to your writing. I've just said a whole load of words which probably don't mean anything to make myself feel good, but the idea is sound. That's where we are. Please try and use all three. Also, if you can, use signposting. Signposting? What's signposting, Tim? Well, I'm glad you asked. This is things like, to begin, in the first place, I will argue that it's stuff that you might use to progress a conversation. Next, I will discuss. Before thinking about, it is important to think about. Finally, okay, and to conclude, in conclusion, these are all about progressing through. So in the first place, after this, I will talk. Finally, this is to show, it shows where you are in the text. Particularly useful for, well, it's useful for everything actually. There's also discourse markers, which also tell you whereabouts you are in the text and keep you interested, keep you engaged. So, in addition, moreover, furthermore, for example, similarly, contrariwise, this is signposting language. Try and use it. Then you can use devices. This does not mean you can take your mobile phone into the exam. Do not take your mobile phone into the exam. If you do take your mobile phone into the exam, the invigilator will probably smash it with a hammer. So don't do that. Imagery. Imagery can include things like metaphor, simile, personification, the pathetic fallacy. What's the pathetic fallacy? Yeah, I don't know, it's pathetic. It's these pathetic fallacies where you describe the weather with human emotions. But you use these things regularly. The soldier was a lion in the fight. Metaphor. The soldier was like a lion in the fight. Aha, simile. There we go. Does that make sense? Good. This is imagery, but you can also use the DeForest devices. Oh, sounds nice, doesn't it? DeForest makes me want to go and take a walk in the woods. Oh, and here I am! My goodness, it's like magic. So, DeForest is a cunning way to remember how to a list of devices. So, for example, the D would be direct address. That's where you are being addressed directly. You, the reader. If anywhere you see something like you or we or us related to you, that's direct address. It engages your reader. You can use that. Alliteration. That's where you have awesome alliteration. Appealingly awesome alliteration is where you've got words that begin with the same sound, same letter or same sound, and it makes it trip off the tongue, all the fiddly little bits falling through the fingers. Use facts. This is not things that are true. This is things that are testable. You can use opinions. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's things that you believe, whether they're true or not. You can use rhetorical questions. What's a rhetorical question? Exactly. A question that you don't require an answer to. You could use emotive language. That's where you're trying to evoke someone's emotions. It's disgraceful. It is a disgrace. It is disgusting. It is absolutely impious. This is emotive language. Statistics. Now, here's an interesting point. 90% of all statistics are made up, including that one. But they do sound really good. They sound like they're facts. And triplets. This is sometimes called the rule of three. Politicians use it all the time. Watch a political speech sometime, and you will see that they speak in threes. That's a really good thing to do. So when you're writing, also by the way, when you're writing your plan, you can have 3 points for each point. So let's get on to Spag. That's my friend Spag Yeti. Don't go there. Let's start off with spelling. Spelling, I'm afraid, in English, you're just going to have to learn them. You're just going to have to learn them. Punctuation, similarly, is actually quite simple in English, but it's worth knowing it. Grammar, again, not nearly as difficult as it seems, but practice makes perfect with that one. So let's start with spelling. Things that often trip people up in spelling in English are homophones, words that sound the same. Think of there, or here and here. Think of 8 and 8. I ate 8 after 8s. Night sometimes trips people up. Night has silent letters, depending on whether it's a knight with a sword, with the silent K and the silent G and H, or whether it's just the night where you ate the 8 after 8s. And then you've got an extra G and H. Double letters, things like disappointment, address, Mississippi, though you're unlikely to need to spell Mississippi, to be honest, unless you happen to come from Mississippi. Double letters trip people up. If you know you're going to be using a word, if it's a common word that you use a lot, make sure you know how to spell it. Okay. Punctuation. I would like to quote something from Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett says, "Multiple exclamation marks are the sure sign of a diseased mind." If you're going to use an apostrophe, an exclamation mark, make sure you only use one. If you're using 2, something's going wrong. Okay. End your sentences with one of those 3. Do not end it with a comma, because that doesn't end a sentence. It's not strong enough. A full stop is strong enough. With apostrophes, there are only 2 uses. That is omissive and possessive. So the omissive is what we're all very familiar with. That is where you omit a letter. Can't you think of any examples of that? I don't know if that's going to be a problem for you. It shouldn't be. See what I did there? Cunning, right? So yes, that's the omissive use. The possessive use is where you're showing that something belongs to someone. This is This is Karen, apostrophe S, Karen's pen. It isn't, it's my pen, but that's irrelevant. It belongs to someone, and that can be quite confusing at times. So normally the apostrophe goes before the S, the possessive S, but occasionally if the word ends in S, the apostrophe goes after the final S, like Jesus' disciples. There are no other uses. Do not, under any circumstance, use an apostrophe to pluralize. If you do that, I will have to come and hunt you down. Do not use an apostrophe to make something plural. Please, just don't do it. Tenses. There's time and mode represented here. So you've got past, present and future, but you've also got the simple, continuous and perfect. And each past, present and future have a simple, continuous and perfect form. Perfect, by the way, can also be simple and continuous. You need a graph in 3D to properly represent it. I'm not going to go through all of them now. I do have a separate Spag for functional skills video. I would refer you to that. It's good. It'll answer all your questions. I think it's good. I'm slightly biased. There's also the passive or active voice to consider. America was discovered by Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus discovered America, active. America was discovered, passive. It depends on what is important in your sentence. There's also agreement, subject verb agreement. So that's things like your third person singular S. He lives. She eats. And please do not use an apostrophe with the third person singular, because that's not how you use apostrophes. You're not missing any letters out. Also use the correct tense. So if you're writing was and were is the classic. You were working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. I was visiting that cocktail bar, for example. Right, the types of questions that you're going to experience can be mapped on a kind of matrix. You have to consider tone and style based on your audience and purpose. So for tone, you have a continuum from formal to informal, and for style, you have a continuum from personal to impersonal. And this will inform the type of language you're going to employ. Some examples. If a personal but formal might be an email to your boss, an email to the council, something like that. That would be personal to an individual person, but it would be formal. An impersonal but formal thing might be a report, where you're writing it, again, possibly for your boss, possibly for anonymous people who you don't know, for people who might see it at some point in the future. That's a report. It's in formal language. It's in formal language, not informal. Sorry, gets a little bit confusing. You might have something personal and informal, like, for example, a web forum, where you're writing to an individual or a group of individuals, but it's much less formal language. So you can drop the odd slang word in there. You can use the you type language. You can use the I type language. You can use first person, which you wouldn't do in a report. In a report, you would not say, I feel that, I think that, because you're not being asked for that. You're only being asked for facts. You can also have impersonal but informal. That happens a lot if you happen to be writing for the Sun newspaper. So for example, an article will be impersonal. You're not writing to anybody. You're not writing to your mum. You're not writing to any individual like King Charles III, God bless him. But it's also informal, because you're writing as if your mum might read it, or your mate Charlie Boy. Not to be confused with King Charles III, God bless him. Okay, all that remains for me to say is good luck. Guys, you've got this. This is an exam that you can pass, and I wish you the very best of luck with it. Goodbye. Cloud goes by, and then the tree comes up. Yay! This has been an Oak Tree English video. Thank you. Goodbye.